Hey, good morning, Limitless Kids. It is so good to see you again. Really hope you've had a brilliant week. And I'm wondering how you got on last week as we discussed what it means to thirst for more of God. I would love to hear all about it. And please make sure you put any comments or thoughts on the Limitless Kids Facebook page. Before we go any further, we have a fantastic hello and welcome, an amazing word of encouragement from the wonderful Rosanna.
I am Rosanna and I'm part of the best team in LGCC churches, Limitless. And I'm here today to say hello, Limitless Kids and youth. Oh, it's been a long time, isn't it? We haven't seen each other. So much has happened. But I'm here to tell you, do not fear. Did you know in the Bible appears do not fear 365 times. I think God is trying to tell us something, because we have 365 days in the year, and there is one do not fear in the Bible for each day. Isn't that amazing? We've been going through a lot in the last few months with lockdown, with Corona, COVID-19, and God's still saying to us today, do not fear. He is with us. He's protecting us. And I hope that I can see you soon. So guys, just trust in Jesus and know that He's the champion of the world and in heaven. He overcame all sorts of problems. And if we partnership, if we become a close friend of Jesus, we also can overcome all the problems. Let's continue to pray for ourselves and for the leaders of our countries, for our leaders, for Jesus to give them the solutions, because He knows it all and He has the solutions for the problems that the world at the moment and in the future is going to go through. So anyway, I really miss you guys, and I hope to see you soon. Bye!
So earlier on today, I asked my girls if there was one thing that they would ask God for, what would that be? And one of them says their own bedroom. And I was thinking about that as well. If there was one thing I was going to ask God for, it might be a bigger house with a swimming pool, or it might be a really nice holiday. But when I thought about it, really, that's just materialistic things, isn't it? And some of the things that I wouldn't mind to ask God for would be to have more patience, or to be more generous, or to be more fun. Anything that actually represents the characteristics of God. If I was to ask you that same question, I wonder what you would say. So why don't you just press pause and have a chat to those around you and think about, if there was one thing I was going to ask God for, what would that be? So I hope you had fun having those conversations and finding out what those around you would ask God for. If God gave you that very thing that you asked Him for, how would you thank Him? You know, we've looked at worship and thankfulness and praise lots of times before, but how would we thank God for the one thing that we are really desperate for? Why don't you press pause and have a chat with those around you? You see, this week we're going to look at the brilliant story of Hannah and Samuel. But before Hannah had Samuel and God answered her prayers, there was lots of things that was going on in Hannah's life. And a few weeks ago we spoke about reading the book of Samuel, didn't we? Chapter 1, 2 and 3. So I hope that some of you are acquainted with that story a little bit. But this week we're going to talk about the story of Hannah when she was taunted by a rival woman in her town. This woman had many children, but Hannah didn't have any. And she was desperate to have a child. And this woman, Peninnah, she was really horrible to Hannah. And in one version of the Bible, it says that she taunted Hannah and made fun of her because she didn't have any children. And in another version of the Bible, it says that she was a rival of Hannah's. Hannah was so sad but yet she conducted herself so well because she was full of God. The rest of the story is that Hannah pleaded to God for a baby and she had her son Samuel. Why don't you watch this video for a bit more detail on this story?
Slapstick Theater. Hannah and God. This is Hannah.
Hi.
Hannah was married to a man named Elkanah.
Hey!
But they were not able to have any children. This made Hannah sad.
Aw.
It's okay. Come on.
Every year, Hannah and Elkanah would go to the house of the Lord at Shiloh to pray to God and offer sacrifices. Hannah would cry out and pray to the Lord. She told God that if He gave her a son, she would give him back to Him and that her son would serve God all the days of his life. Hannah was so upset that one of the priests, Eli, thought there was something off about her. But Hannah told him that she had been praying because she had a broken heart. Eli told her, "May the God of Israel grant the request you've made."
Thank you.
And then Hannah was no longer sad. In due time, Hannah became pregnant and gave birth to a son.
Yeah!
She named him Samuel, for she said, "I asked the Lord for him." Hannah did as she said she would, and once Samuel was a little older, she took him to the temple. Hannah prayed and gave thanks to God, and Samuel grew up in the temple serving the Lord.
You see, what we see here is Hannah cried out for God. She cried out for a child because she was desperate to have a son. And she went to the temple and she promised God, "If you give me the one thing that I'm asking for, I will thank you by giving him back to you." Now, I wonder if any of you were given one thing that you asked for, if your response would be, "Okay, God, if you give me this, I will just give it back to you." But that's exactly what Hannah did. You see, Hannah had a soft heart. She was sad. She was taunted by this other woman. She was considered her rival. And yet Hannah behaved amazingly, incredibly brilliant because she focused everything on God. Yes, she was sad. Yes, she cried. Yes, she found it really difficult. But instead of being nasty to this other woman and trying to get her own back, she focused on her relationship with God, on the one person who could answer her prayers. Hannah went to God and said, "God, please give me a son." And he did. And she was full of thanks and praise. She didn't hold him tight herself, but she merely offered him back to God. I'd like to think that I would do that with the things that God has given me, that I would offer them back to him and be so full of thankfulness and praise. But I'm not sure that I would do naturally what Hannah did. She was a woman full of God in an incredible way. She had a soft heart, where this other lady, Penina, had a hard heart. She was taunting Hannah. She was nasty. She was goading at her. And you know, there's things in our lives, isn't it, when people are nasty to us or unkind to us. And sometimes it's about the one thing that we haven't got. Maybe we haven't got brothers and sisters, and that's something that we would really love. Or maybe there's other things in our lives that we are desperate for, and we see other people around us having them, and we're just really sad. How do we respond? Do we make fun of other people? Are we unkind to those who are unkind around us? Or do we focus everything on God and pray to God and ask him for that very thing and keep our hearts soft? I've got a really cool illustration to show you. And so if you just take a few moments and have a little look at this, we'll have lots of fun. So as you can see, I've got 2 bottles of pop here. One is half full and one is full. I have covered my table with something. So if you're going to try this at home, make sure you get something covered or do it somewhere that your mums or your dads are happy with. So I'm going to, what would happen if I shaked this bottle? What do you think would happen to the juice? Okay, so the juice might fizz up, it might not. Shall we have a go? Okay. You see, when we're shaken, when we're upset, when things happen to us, it can sometimes feel a bit like this. We're all over the place. We feel really sad, don't we, and really distressed. And we're all shaken up, and then what happens is, it's a little fizz. This bottle is only half full. What do you think will happen to this full bottle if I shaked it up and down? Well, shall we have a go? Life throws things at us all the time, doesn't it? People can be unkind, they can say nasty things, can't they? A bit like what happened in our story today. But if I shake this bottle and it's full to the top with gorgeous pop, whoa, can you see what happens? I am getting so... Whoa, look at that. The pop went everywhere. It fizzed and it overflowed to what was going on around it. It's a bit like that with our hearts. If we're not full of God and things shake around us, then what happens is we don't have enough goodness of God to overflow. But if we're full of God, like this bottle was, and things around us shake us, nasty things are said to us, or things are uncertain, when we're shaken like that and we fizz, we still fizz the goodness of God because we're full and overflowing with God's goodness. As you saw in that illustration, when you fizz up the bottle that is half full, it doesn't overflow. It will fizz up a little bit, but it doesn't overflow. But when the full bottle is shaken up, when things around it affect it and shake it up, it just overflows and goes everywhere. And that's like having the presence of God in our lives. That was exactly the same with Hannah. She was so full of God when things around her got really difficult, when she was really sad and distressed, when things shaked around her. She wasn't flat, but she continued to overflow and fizz with the Holy Spirit because she was so full of God. And that's really, really cool. And there's a brilliant verse in the Bible in the book of Luke. And it's Luke chapter 6, verse 45. And I'm going to read that now. Luke chapter 6, verse 45. And it says, "A good person brings good out of the treasure of good things in his or her heart. A bad person brings bad out of the treasure of bad things. For the mouth speaks what the heart is full of." You see, those bottles, when the full bottle is full, out of it came the fullness of what it was full of. And with the other bottle that was only half full, not very much, actually nothing good came out of it. And it's the same with us. If we're full of good, if we're full of God, then out of the overflow will come good things. We will speak good things. We will do good things. We will respond and behave in a brilliant way. But if we're feeling sad in our hearts and we're feeling bad in our hearts and naughty and unkind, then those things are going to come out of our mouths. And so Hannah demonstrates this beautifully, where she was so full of God that only good things came out of her mouth. She ended up having this brilliant son that was raised in the temple with Eli, that heard from God at a really young age and went on to do absolutely brilliant things. And you can find out a little bit more about that story if you go and read the rest of the book of Samuel, if you haven't done so already. Why don't you go and get some fizzy bottles, ask your parents, of course, and make sure you've got adult supervision, and make sure that you do it somewhere that it's okay to get a bit wet, maybe in the garden or even in the bath or the kitchen sink. Have a little go at those bottles and have a little think about, how does this relate to me and what can I learn from this? Another thing is a looking at the life of prayer, which we talk about so much, but prayer is really, really important. And that's probably why it's spoken about loads in the Bible and why we talk about it a lot at kids ministry. But I've done something this week that I would love you to go away and have a think of or make for yourself. So I have, and these are our activities this week. Why don't you go away and make this prayer poster? I've put some ribbon on it, and I've just got some card and written prayer and decorated it, and I've got an envelope there where I'm keeping my paper and my pens, and I've got a little envelope there which is of my prayer requests, where I write down what are the things that I'm praying for this week. But actually, also, what are my praise and thanksgiving response? How am I going to respond to God when he answers my prayer? Think about Hannah. How did she respond when God answered her prayer? And how can we respond when God answers ours? You could also maybe use some prayer jars. Maybe you just need 2 jars that you can decorate at home, and then you can label them as well with your prayer requests on one and the other one, which is your praise and your thanksgiving response. There are many different ways that you can use to demonstrate your prayer. So you can press pause and go and make those now, and I'll just see you in a few moments. Another activity is alphabet givers. Why don't you write the alphabet A to Z on a piece of paper or card or anything, and why don't you see if there's different things of the alphabet that you can fill out of things that you can give praise and thanks for. When I think of the letter G, I think, oh, why don't I give something to somebody? What about B? How can I be kind to somebody else? And there's lots of different things that you can do. So why don't you press pause and have a go at filling that. So when God answers your prayer, you can have a look at those alphabet givers and find something that you can do or say in response to God for answering your prayers. Just before we go into a time of worship, I'm going to put some questions on the screen, and I would like you to see if you can have a go at answering them. It's just a little quiz about what we've been talking about today. So why don't you have a go at answering these and see how many you get right. The answers will be put on the Facebook page later on today. For our worship today, we're going to sing the song Ask, Seek, Knock. I know it's fairly new and you might need to think back in your memory to some of those actions. But this song talks about if we ask God and if we seek him, we will see that he is always there. So why don't you grab your flags or your ribbons or your bubbles or your instruments, your pots and pans if you haven't got any instruments at home, or you can dance or sing and do the actions as we worship God together to this brilliant song, Ask, Seek, Knock. And we'll see you next week. Bye.
I'm reading my early, and this is what it says to me. It tells me that I'm never ever alone. I'm learning how Jesus came down to us and gave his best. Without a doubt the best friend you'll ever know. Our God knows exactly what I need, so I remember this. Let's go! When you ask, he cares. When you seek, he's there. When you knock, 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 God opens up the door. When you ask, he cares. When you seek, he's there. When you knock, 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 God opens up the door. Oh, oh. I'm reading my VIP early, and this is what it says to me. It tells me that I'm never ever alone. I'm learning how Jesus came down to us and gave his best. Without a doubt the best friend you'll ever know. Our God knows exactly what I need, so I remember this. Let's go! When you ask, he cares. When you seek, he's there. When you knock, 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 God opens up the door. When you ask, he cares. When you seek, he's there. When you knock, 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 God opens up the door. Oh, oh. When you ask, he cares. When you seek, he's there. When When you knock, 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 God opens up the door. When you ask, He cares. When you seek, He's there. When you knock, 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 God opens up the door.